Coaching in Session.
Your exclusive destination for unparalleled personal and professional growth.
With your host, Michael Rearden.
Whether you choose to live within limits or break free, your mindset journey begins here.
Nate Green, success and performance coach. We're going to be talking about your work today. We're going to be looking at success and then, of course, performance in a very different light. I'm sure you have already touched on it in many of your podcast appearances or just guest appearances, keynote speakers or speeches. And we are going to be looking at, well, what is success? What is performance? And why should we be chasing it? It's going to be definitely a topic that we're going to be diving into today. But before we do that, could you please tell us or tell the audience who you are, what you do, and how you help?
Man, my name is Nate Green, but before we dive into that, Michael, appreciate you having me on this podcast. It's awesome. So I appreciate the invite. It's incredible. So, where I'm at and where I'm going, people don't spend a lot of time asking me that. They normally want to know more about my history or the book. And so I love that question because, where I'm at right now is walking through a journey of trying to live out purpose. And so for me, what is purpose to me? And that comes down to helping people break free. That is my number one purpose. That's my number one goal is I want people to break free from these things that are our holdbacks, whether it's cracked lenses or the cognitive biases or these expectations or the noises of other people, all that kind of stuff. I want people to let go of the past, let go of what was, and start defining what is. And that's really where I want people to chase after the lighthouse, their goals. But in order to really go after that future, you really have to release those dead weights from the past.
Mm-hmm. There's a kind of a confusion, I think, with some people when it comes to success or purpose or goals or mission. They're very synonymous in the sense of they can mean the same thing, but to different people, it can derive a different thing. For example, men, they love the idea of a mission, the role for a father, the role for a husband, right? To protect and provide. They love that mission. I'm going to say the majority at least. And when we look at those words, is there a difference to them? Or is it something that, depending on your mindset, if you say, well, this is success for me, this is a purpose for me, this is a goal for me, this is a mission for me, it is all the same fire on the inside, basically the outlet trying to, get what we have inside of us out into the world.
See, I like that question because it's analytical. And for me, its missions a lot of times are more short-lived. Purpose should connect to lighthouse, which is forever. That's deathbed goals, like that forever part. But, goals and missions and all this other kind of stuff, a lot of times they may be seasonal. And that's where each one of us, how we define it, how we connect to it, that's really what matters. But you have to make sure that whether it is goals, whether it's missions, or whether it's a lighthouse, like a forever, that's what your entire purpose is. That's like, it's all personal. It's just, you have to make sure that you know the difference in your own mind, your own heart, because my goals are on the journey towards my lighthouse. My missions are segmented of periods of time that, okay, here's what we're trying to do now. But that's not what I'm trying to do forever. And for me, what I just told you about helping people break free, that's the interlacing that comes through every area of my life. I want my wife to break free from her past so that she can chase out the best version of her. I want to be the example for my son of how to break free. I want to help him and guide him to break free. So that's an interlacing purpose that goes through each one of these different goals and missions that I might come up against.
Would you say if someone didn't define a clear definition for these, the life purpose, the mission, the goals, they would get a feeling of being stuck or lost?
I would agree with you 100%. Like, it's hard to really know where you're going if you don't have that heart tug, if you don't have an end goal, a lighthouse, if you don't have somewhere that you're moving in. And that's really where, I know that on your podcast, you've talked a lot about resilience. And if you don't have a mission, or an end mission, such as a lighthouse of where you're going, it's very easy to give up on the journey. So you have to have that end goal of really where you're going after in order to make sure that you have the appropriate amount of resilience. You have everything needed. The mission has to have a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Very true. I know sometimes when, someone reaches out for coaching or they look for help, if they have these vague ideas of what they want, the first couple sessions maybe are trying to figure out, well, let's figure out where we need to go first, because if we're just going to say, okay, well, if this is your mission, right? So your mission might be, all right, I'm going to change careers or something, right? Like I'm going to do something with a job to make some more money or something. And you do this, and then you're so hyper focused on that mission that you weren't looking at your purpose, or you weren't looking at the idea of success in the sense of what is truly success. And everyone has their own definition of success, I believe, because success for me can be just having time to spend with the family. And it's
Hmm.
so simple, right? It's so little. Like everyone says, I can always make time to hang out with my kids and hang out with my wife and my parents, but do you make the time for it? And
Mm.
many people, they get so caught up in this idea of workaholics, performance, and they say, well, I have to perform, I have to do all of these things. And so they will put things on the back burner: family, health, fitness, right? And they say, you know what, these things are not important because they're so hyper focused. Is there a harmony or a balance, whichever word you want to use, to really give people an understanding of, if they're going after success and performance, there is a magic formula in a sense?
The word balance, some people love it, some people hate it. I stay away from it because being a high performer, I'm naturally a little bit unbalanced. But you can be a high performer and even a little bit unbalanced, but have great boundaries. So I like to work with my clients on boundaries. How are you setting boundaries for your time, boundaries for your principles, boundaries for your process? Give you an example. I will wake up at 4:30 every morning and I will work hard, and I will work hard all throughout the day. But you know what? When it comes time for about 5:30 in the afternoon, it's family time. And then I put a boundary in place that work doesn't interfere with that. Same thing on the weekends. I'll get up between 4:30 and 5 every Saturday and Sunday. I will work until my son wakes up or my wife wakes up. Then there's a boundary. Now I have to convert over to now dad or husband. And it's leaving what was in the morning there. It's a boundary. It's not time to keep that going. It's not time to on a Saturday to work on your work stuff until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Why? Because you're OCD or you're so persistent, you're so driven and motivated that you now are sacrificing family, or you're sacrificing relationships that are key in your life for some achievement of a different definition of success. My theory a long time ago is that if I can't achieve success while having these boundaries in place, then I don't want the success, because the success goes beyond just money in the bank or freedoms or these different aspects. What is good if you get to the end of your goal and you burned every bridge in the process?
Very true. I think of the end goal. Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. And it's interesting because many people, they look at the end goal and they say they want the job, they want the money, they want the house, they want the cars, they want the loving family. And it's almost like they are not really present during each of those transitions or the moments, because they're just so focused on, okay, what's next, what's next. Is there an appropriate time to slow down? Because performance is basically pushing, saying, let's perform, let's be better, like, let's push ourselves to the limit in a sense, like, but is there something that we have to give ourselves, as people or coaches, or as a mentor to someone as you're coaching, to say it, we could take a break sometimes, we can have the cake, we can have the ice cream, but when it's time to work, it's time to work, but when it's time to rest, we rest.
So there's a lot of studies on dopamine release in entrepreneurs and high performers. And I think what gets forgotten is the dopamine release is not at the end of the achievement. It's actually on the journey. It's the chase. And so why can't you enjoy the chase? Why are we always waiting for a 20-year mark down the road where then all of a sudden our life will somehow culminate in this great perfection because we hit a specific goal? That's not how it works. Enjoy the journey. And the journey, that's where like having those boundaries becomes so vital, because great, you might actually, I just had lunch today with this high profile attorney in the area. And you know what? After 20 years, he got a divorce. He was so dedicated to his job, but he burnt a lot of the bridges in some relationships. Man, Like, who cares if you got wealth, if you got security, if you got all this other stuff, but yet you have instability in your relationships and you've damaged your kids and and what good is that? Now we're none of us are perfect. Like I'm still a work in progress, man. I'm rough around the edges. There was times where I didn't have my boundaries as well organized back in my early days, but I realized very quickly of where that road was leading. And so, for me, it's become about the journey, enjoying the development, enjoying the process, enjoying the small achievements, and even where I struggle, celebrating the small achievements, kind of those little notches as you go versus the big markers. That's a tough one for me, but sitting in the moment and being in the moment, I think is very vital for us and enjoying that chase, enjoying the journey.
Would it be accurate to say success is being able to enjoy the journey?
I think for everyone, it depends on what you enjoy. Some people have a sick and twisted way of enjoying the brutal punishments, and so they force themselves into kind of like a bad relationship with their time management and with people. And so the word enjoyment is very tough, but for me, it's success is about going after a goal or a lighthouse that goes beyond just these rudimentary aspects of money or wealth or some of these small things. Like, what are the parameters? Everybody's going to define it a little bit different, but in defining what success looks like, you have to make sure that you are looking at it every single day and taking it applicably in your life and saying, wait a second, why? I call it the inner 2-year-old. That inner 2-year-old has to come out. Why is this my goal? Why is this my purpose? Why is this my lighthouse? Why is this, the steps I'm taking? Why? And why am I sacrificing relationships over this? So for each person, enjoyment is definitely a weird word, in my opinion, because some people have an unhealthy relationship with some torture that they put themselves into.
I think of John Lennon because you mentioned time. He says, time enjoyed, spent is not a time wasted. In a sense, he says it a little bit more flowery, right? But the concept is time. We think we have forever. We have tomorrow. We have next week. We have next month. We have next year. We can have 65. And we say, you know what? I have time. But we don't necessarily know what we're losing when that time is passing us by, because when maybe we're 50 down the road and maybe our kids are grown, maybe we have grandbabies and things like that, but we haven't been taking care of our health because we said we'll go to the gym tomorrow, we'll start New Year's resolutions next year or something, right? And it keeps on falling through. And then now you're at this point where you look back and say, you know what? It's a regret of mine with not looking at time as something that was going to be fleeting so quickly, because before you know it, it happens so fast. And I'm sure, as a father, you probably, spoken to other mentors and other, granddads, people who have already done it before, and they are probably in your ear whispering, it goes so fast, pay attention. I can't tell you how many times people tell me that. I go to the gym and the guys who are 50, 60, their kids are, 20, 30 years old. And they're like, it goes so fast. And now we have like 5, 6 grandbabies and stuff like that. And they're talking about how they're giving them all this soda and all this candy and they're giving it back to the parents.
Spoiling them a little bit. That's
Exactly.
awesome.
So it's basically like, like a ticking time bomb. It's like, all right, good luck, son or daughter or whatever. And now they're really able to say, let me slow down, because they have been so busy before.
Mm.
But yet we live in a world that's so busy, that's so disconnected, where we can procrastinate and people don't even know. We can be stagnant and people don't even realize, because they might be on their phone or watching a series for the umpteenth time. And we
Mhm.
have to, have a wake up call at some point. And people typically won't have that wake up call unless a trauma comes into their life, something bad happens, and they say, you know what, let me pay attention. Is there a way that people can say, I need to start paying attention to time? I need to start paying attention to me.
Well, there's a perspective, and life is the fastest way of getting perspective through, like you talked about, trauma, difficulties, hardships. It's amazing how in those moments perspective comes like that. But how do you slow down and create perspective prior to those moments. And that's really where, when you're inside of your own life, you really have to start identifying, how are you going to prioritize your life? How are you going to create the parameters in which that you're going to live? How are you going to create, as Ben Newman says, the standard for how you're going to operate every day? What are the principles? And when you're talking about these different pieces, you have to figure out, what is it that the legacy that you want to have? What is it you want to be known for? And that's where, for me, I had to take a step back and figure out, even recently, what do I want to be known for? I don't want to be a hoorah guy. I don't want to be a guy that just gets people all hyped up. I mean, there's a saying, you motivate an idiot, now you just have a motivated idiot. That's not me. I'm not that hype guy. I'm a nuts and bolts guy. I want to help people work through what's holding them back, so then we can chase after what they're going after. But going back to perspective and slowing down time, you have to have a reality check with yourself. Are the priorities that you're putting in place the real and truthful priorities that you should be chasing after? And then you got to figure out what's your relationship with the priorities. What is your background with those priorities? What did you see as a kid? What did you not see as a kid? What did you experience that is making it where these things are such a priority, where it doesn't matter? You'll burn everything to the ground with your family, but as long as you give them financial stability, that's the only important. Like, why? What is your relationship with that? And so you got to kick out that inner 2-year-old, figure out why is it all in place, and then really start laying down the foundation of what is the parameters and perspective that you really should be living and operating in.
Brought up priorities, and the word values also kind of jumps into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think of marriage, right? We look at priorities in marriage, or we look at values in our partner that we would like to have. And the values don't have to necessarily be tied to a person. The values can be tied to our character and who we want to represent in the world today, tomorrow, next year, next month, whatever. We have to also, be very clear on who we want to be. I know the hero's journey. They talk about, like, you're destined, in a sense, to go on this path, and maybe to people please, or to kind of play it safe. But I'd say dare greatly. I don't mind if you're the villain for a little bit, right? Because you learn about yourself, and and I even say, like, the villain is not necessarily a bad person, because they have their own visions and their own dreams, and it might not be appropriate to society, break some laws and things like that, but they have their own ambitions. And then you even have to ask yourself, there would be no heroes without villains. So
Mm.
in a sense, it's the yin and the yang of life, the good and the bad, where people, they look at the bad things in life, they look at the debt, maybe they look at the broken relationships, the divorces, and they say, like, this part sucks. But they have the good part too, right? They have the part where your partner wants to hang out with you and go on vacations and hold hands, and you go out and eat good foods, and you can feel good after a workout. And we have all of these wonderful things, but our brain, is naturally wired to be negative. So I wanted to ask you, the difference between priorities and values, in a sense. Is there similarities? Is there true differences in the sense of that in building a character?
I mean, I think values to me is like core fundamental pillars that are non-negotiables, for how I'm going to show up every day. And so some people might call them principles, some people might call them standards. I think standards are more action and principles are more action, versus values are so deep rooted that, like, they're almost unbreakable. Like, for me, I want to have an impact and I want to care about people in a way that somebody else might not. So how I walk into a Starbucks might look different. How I interact with different people because of these deep rooted values might look different. It's not so much a principle. Like, I'm not going to be like, hey, every single time I walk into a Starbucks, I'm going to see if there's an old lady that looks sad and say hi to her. No, but the values inside of me say, if I walk in there and with good emotional intelligence, EQ, I look around, and if you pay attention to people, sometimes you can see that pain on their face. And so my values tell me I need to show up in those circumstances. But that's not a principle. That's not a standard, because it's not something that every single time you walk in Starbucks, you're going to see that. It just happens to be, if the opportunity presents itself because of who you are at your core, that's how you must show up.
Important to understand that, I believe, because when it comes to a person, I believe one of the biggest gripes or struggles I think people face is they think someone's going to notice. They think someone's going to save them. Waiting for Superman to come save you
Mm.
is a a popular saying where they are waiting for a moment where everything changes. But yet they are that moment. They just have to create it. They have to literally say, today is the day.
You are the Superman. That's it. You are Superman. Like in your life, you are the main character of your story. So when are you going to show up as the main character of your story? You are the person that needs to save yourself. And yes, you could have supporting traits and supporting individuals like you and I. If we do coaching, if we help people, we don't become the main character. We now become the Robin to the Batman. We help them define and understand how to use their tools better. They get to drive the Batmobile. We have to ride shotgun. It's just the way it goes. But we're here supporting them on their journey to help elevate them inside of their story. And that's where so many people get it completely wrong. And this goes down to every single environment, whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's single moms, single dads, whether it's stay-at-home moms, whether it's stay-home dads. What are these people waiting for? Somebody else to fulfill their life? You complete me. No, you complete yourself. You have to complete yourself. And there's so many holdbacks that we all struggle with. And we all have these kind of misidentifications of how we're supposed to show up. Like you talked about sometimes the villain side. Well, like I look at it as like constraints. Like what are the social constraints? What are the expectational constraints from our family, from the demographics we come from the background? I was like, listen, like I was raised in a poor family. I mean, dirt poor. I went in law enforcement. Most people, when they come out of law enforcement, they go into construction or security. And so then my dad said, hey, you need to go get a job that has a pension or retirement. Well, what did I do? I broke all the molds, all the expectations, and I was the outlier. I went and started a business against everybody's advisement. So for a season, like, could people look at me as like a villain? No, they would just be like, hey, listen, like you're moving outside the social constraints of what because back then in 2008, it wasn't as popular to be an entrepreneur. Now it's kind of like more this really cool thing. Back then it was like, oh, you're doing what? And it was like, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing. Oh, okay. Especially in my family, my church, the people I was around. And so yeah, I was the oddball. And so when you're the oddball, people are like, oh, he's doing that. It's kind of weird. Like you become the outlier. But then it all comes back around. Once they connect, instead of stop judging your actions, they see your values, they see your principles, they see your standards, and they see you showing up day in, day out. And then the end result, they see you land the plane 10, 15, 20 years later with success. And it's like, man, this guy is hungry. This guy's driven, but yet he did never lose sight of where he came from. And he's always there to impact the people he can reach. That's the important part, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's many people right now that are at the precipice of that, but they're at the beginning stages also, and where they're fighting this idea of wanting to be liked and loved by their friends and their family. So they will conform before they say, you know what, let me do something that's different. Let me be the outcast. Let me be the black sheep or whatever in the family, right? Let me start to shake things up. And not many people can do it because, again, they have all these eyes on them and they can't take the pressure. So they say, you know what? I'm just going to succumb. I'm just going to do what they want. And now everyone's happy. But the problem is you're not happy. So now you're struggling, trying to figure out, what is for me? What is my life? And you're literally skipping it because you're trying to people please. You're trying to be the nice guy in a sense. And I encourage you to, go after the things that are truly calling you. It's like a yearning inside. It's almost like, like if you want something in life, like for example, food. Let's say you have a hankering for some pizza, right? So
Yeah.
so you're like,
Cheat nights, baby.
yeah, so you're like, I want some pizza. But now you have to figure out what type of pizza you want. You want pepperoni, you want a sausage, you want a supreme special, right? And then you have to figure out where you're going to get it from, right? There's more than just wanting the pizza. There's the whole process to the pizza because if you get a pizza from Domino's, it might not fulfill you the same as
Mhm.
if you got a pizza from a mom and pop shop that came from Italy and they know how to do their thing. So
Yeah.
in life, we can just take what is handed to us or we can kind of get the frozen thing off the shelf. But we sometimes have to say, you know what? It's about the true meaning, right? I'm looking for the quality. right? Many people kind of get mixed up with quantity or materialistic things very easily, and they don't look at the true meanings of things. So yeah, because if you get a good pizza, I'm telling you, you're good for a whole month. You don't need any more pizza. But if you have a crappy pizza, I'm saying you're gonna have pizza on Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and before you know, you're in this spiral. And that is life. That's the figurative metaphor of life, where you're just kind of doing these things and you're not giving yourself the best of the best. You're not giving yourself the best. You're not doing the best you could. You're not waking up in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. You don't have to wake up at 4. You wake up at 6. It doesn't matter. But you're not waking up with purpose. And so when you just do these things like hazardously, you feel it. And I think of this famous pianist. His name is like Pasekwi or something. I butchered the name, but he talks about this idea of practicing. He says, if I don't practice for one day, I notice. If I don't practice for 2 days, depending on how you want to go, my wife notices or the critics notice. And then the third day, if I don't practice, the world notices. And in a sense, we have that duty to ourselves. We can either go a day and where we notice where things are not right, 2 days, the critics, the naysayers, our loved ones, they're saying, what's going on, right? They might not say anything. And then the third day, everyone can see, right? Where we can say, you know what? I'm going to be pronounced every single day. And I know it's hard, but if you can figure out the process to do that, oh man, it's very simple. And I say, start simple, stupid. It could be one email. It could be one phone call. It could be one blog, one word. Heck, if you want to go so small, I hope it's not that, but we want to figure out where we need to go, right? So, my question to you is, how can people begin almost foolproof?
I mean, for me, I'll take you back through my journey just to kind of make it real easy because I love what you're saying is, if you're not living in the truth of who you really are and who you're built to be, then you're living in this like awkward stage. It's like a hyena trying to be a house dog. It just doesn't work. And so when you're talking about this, we all have these like beautiful individualized, definition of who we are, but it can't be based upon other people's expectations because that can really morph how we show up. And that's a big problem. And so we deal with this all the time with entrepreneurs we work with and just different hungry driven individuals because a lot of times they're completely morphing into a different personality trait or a different way they show up every day, and it just doesn't work. They become sometimes even bittered. They have this bitterness inside of them that they're like, wait a second, like I can't be me, and they feel like they're trapped and caged, and it's so painful. And so for me, when I was young, just walking through the journey when I was a cop, it was kind of I still had this unsettled spirit because my dad told me I need to get a job with a pension and retirement. So back before I was a cop, I was like, okay, what's something I can have a lot of adrenaline and I can have a pension and retirement? And so that's kind of where law enforcement came in. But then I still felt this unsettled spirit. Like, is this all I got? Is this the best? Is this really what I'm built for? And then I started doing a bunch of research. And the best part is I didn't do research on success. I didn't do research on the stuff. No, I did research on me. I can't even remember countless personality traits, different tests, cognitive tests, career tests over and over again, every single one I could get my hands on. Because how can I make decisions about where I'm going if I don't know the vehicle that I'm actually going to take there? And that's how I really took the time to figure me out, is I would research and read and understand all these different traits and be like skill sets, abilities, capabilities, wait a second, holdbacks, these different sides. And only through that discovery process that I really gain awareness. And when you gain awareness, that's when you can start laying the groundworks towards your goals, your missions, and then your lighthouse. Is only once you have that true identity of what I call your core. That's your vehicle. That's your biggest beast that you're going to take through the rest of your life. And yes, you can grow it, expand it, and make it better. But the first thing you have to do is have that realization of who you are and what you are built to take on. Then you can start the rest of your plan.
I know we've been beating around the bush or alluding to the idea of the naysayers in our world. One of the reasons why I started the company, Coaching and Session is the podcast, is the umbrella of the company. Reven Concepts. Reven is just never backwards. And never is a powerful word, right? It is always and never a fighting word. And when you get a person in your life, and sometimes it's the people you love, it could even be yourself because you love yourself, your mom, your dad, your teachers, your friends, and they will say something to you And it's almost a shocking revelation. It's like, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to play it safe? Why can't I have someone who, tells me to dare greatly? And if I fail, I have the ability to get back up. I was thinking of a saying, my kids are very young. I have a newborn and I have a 2-year-old. And
Congrats. That's awesome.
yeah, so it's a lot of fun right now. And I'm thinking of a saying that I can say to them, just very similar to how my dad gave me a saying. My dad said, handle your business. Now, I don't know what the business was. I didn't know what the business was. I'm in third grade. What's the business, right? Just handle your business, right? Whatever comes in front of you, whatever needs to be addressed, you handle your business, right? And so I was like, okay, that's a good saying, right? I could say that to my son, but I don't want to, use what he did because he's still around. So he's going to say that to or to his grandson, his granddaughter. I was thinking, whether we win or whether we lose today, we get up and we do it again. That's what I think I want to say to them.
I
Something
love
where
that.
it's like, powerful, it's motivational, and we're not focused on the results so much. We're just focused on we have more stuff to do, the progress idea. And I know many people, when they think of progress, if they don't see it immediately, they want instant gratification. Amazon, if it's not the same day or the next day, we got a problem, right? But yet, sometimes in life, things take time. How can people start to give themselves this idea that our best self might be a project?
Well, I will tell you that your best self is a project, guaranteed. Like, no doubt about it. If we would be in this situation where our greatest self is today, then why keep on moving forward? Because we have to be development. And then also, just want to make sure everybody is clear. These holdbacks in our minds, these things that we need to be cautious of listening to, or even going back and seeing what we had heard in our past, it might not even be from a bad place. Like my dad, he told me to get a job that had a pension retirement. That came from a protective heart out of love for me. And so people are always like, oh man, like, I had good parents. Or, hey, listen, like, yeah, my dad was a jerk and I was traumatic on this side, but, my mom was great. You don't always have to look in darkness to find derailments. And so those are the things that we have to be aware constantly of, the things that are said to us, the things that are said to our kids. So that's something, an encouragement to you is like, as you raise your kids with your parents, listen and pay attention to what's being said to your kids, even from your parents. I had to correct my mom, who is a therapist, amazing woman. But my son did something that was like a massive step of him getting outside of his box. Well, her statement to him when she heard about it was, well, that was really out of character. Well, wait a second. Character is a very specific word. That's like saying, like, character is like a good thing and you went outside of that. That's a bad thing. So I actually had to correct her. I said, hey, mom, listen, I need you to take that back and restate what you just said. And she's like, okay. And so we worked through it. And it was like, okay, son, like, listen, like, she wasn't trying to say that you're outside of what is good. Just saying, hey, that's a huge step of growth for you. And so, like, even phraseology, simple things we have to watch out, because we're putting limiters in our mind at all times throughout each phase. And so we have to make sure and start rewriting those limiters, reframing it from childhood, from past relationships. And then even worse, when you do have trauma or backgrounds in situations like that with ex-spouses or girlfriends or boyfriends, or in my case, my older brother that was just relentless and awful growing up. We have these things that create so much pressure cooking. But then the perspective now, when you're older, you can reframe it. And then when you do have kids, how do we get ahead of it? And how do we start putting that? It's like, I love what that, like, no matter what, we are going to get it, whether win or lose, we're going to go at it again. We're going to do it again. And that's similar to what I tell my son is, it doesn't matter what you want to be great at. I want you to be great at who you are. And I want you to push yourself based upon you. I don't have any expectations for my son, meaning I don't want him to be an entrepreneur. I don't want him to be a football player. I don't have any specific wants. I'm not trying to fix my past with him like a lot of parents do. I want him to find what interests him, and I want him to go after it wholeheartedly. That's it. That's what I want him to do. And so we have to make sure that we allow freedoms inside of our kids. Make sure that we understand, like, there's no parameters, there's no boxes. If you can see it, I'm going to help you achieve it. I'm going to do everything I can to support you in it. And that's very important for me.
Yeah, very true. And it's one of the better types of parenting. And it also is going to correlate into the coaching world too, because we don't necessarily know the client that's going to be giving you a call or the person saying, "Hey, Nate, I'm trying to do this in my life." And, of course you can put your own narrative on this person, or you can say, "You know what, let me understand you. Let me learn about you, right? Let me figure out what makes you tick, right? I know what makes me tick, right? I know what wakes me up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day. But what about you?" And that's where the work begins. And I know it can be scary for many individuals to reach out to someone and to have some faith and have trust in them, of course, but I encourage people to begin to nurture a relationship, to ask for help. And it could be at a place where you are just completely lost, or you have some inkling of where you need to be. Whether it is the long road or the short road, don't be afraid to go on it. There's just so much more to life than to be waiting by the sidelines. We need to get in the game. And this conversation is definitely one to get your mind right, to get your purpose there, to get that lighthouse flaring. So it is, you can't miss it, right? Like if you're on a boat and it's Titanic and there's icebergs around, you're not hitting nothing, right? Because that lighthouse is showing you the way. And Nate, like before we wrap up, I would love to get some final words that you could leave the audience with, and then for you to tell the audience where they could find you and reach out to you.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that. The journey that you're on, it doesn't matter what phase of that journey or what circumstances on your journey. The biggest thing to know is you're not done. And there's always hope. There's always a future. There's always excitement that's just around the corner. So to give up is to give yourself a disservice. It's time to charge forward, but make sure that you have the right tools in the toolbox, to make sure that you have the right team in your corner, and to make sure you have the right roadmap to find that success. People can find me on Instagram at I am Nate Green, or my website, which is Success with Nate Green.
And it'll be easy for everyone. All the links are right down below. And I can tell people just from speaking with Nate for this, short episode, he's going to be someone who is not only going to come in, to sessions with passion and vigor, but he's going to come in with a gentle hand in a sense. I'm sure he'll be firm too if he needs to be. Like if you need, like he's gonna give it to you. Better watch out. But what I'm saying is, you need coaches that are going to be your biggest supporters, but you be your biggest cheerleaders, because as we said early on, I love harping on it. You're going to have naysayers in your world, right? It could be your coworkers, your boss, it could be your spouse even. You can have someone that just might not believe in your dream. And one of the, I would say, roles for a coach is to come in to understand your dream and say, if this is what you want to go for, and if this is what lights you up, then let's go for it, right? The worst thing that can happen is we fail and that it wasn't the way, and we figure out what it is. So, but typically that doesn't happen because we do the groundwork, we figure out everything before we even start taking actions. That this is why it's so important to have a guide, a mentor, a coach in your corner. Because if you just kind of say, I'm just going to go, sure, you're going to go somewhere, right? But then I don't want you to go somewhere in the wrong direction. So figure out where you need to be, figure out where you need to go. Reach out to Nate Green. All the links again right down below. He's going to be a wonderful asset in your corner. And I do want to thank you, Nate, for coming on, spending some time, and of course, talking about your work today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This is incredible.